Her mechanics walked off the job with a $2 billion deal hanging in the balance. Renata Cole stood on a showroom floor next to a hypercar that wouldn't start and called a stranger in a stained van a waste of her morning. What she didn't know was that the man she was mocking had designed the very system that was failing, and by the time she found out, her own chief engineer's career would be the one on the line. Stick around, because what's hidden inside that engine bay is going to change everything about how this deal closes. If this one gets you, hit like, and drop the city you're watching from. The dealership was the kind of place that didn't have prices on anything, because if you had to ask, you weren't the kind of customer they wanted walking through the glass doors. Eli Navarro had never walked through those doors in his life, not until this morning when the manager called him directly, voice tight with a kind of panic that money usually didn't allow itself to show. "We need someone now," the manager had said. The contracted team just walked. Something about a liability clause. "I don't care who you are, Eli, I need this car running by 2 o'clock. Eli had been elbow deep in a transmission rebuild at the independent shop where he worked 3 days a week, the kind of place with a coffee pot older than most of his customers' cars. He'd almost said no. He had Theo's parent-teacher conference at 4, and showing up late to that particular meeting once already this semester had cost him a long, quiet look from his son that he still hadn't fully recovered from. But the manager had said the number, $400 an hour, cash, starting immediately, and Eli had thought about the tutoring bills stacking up on the kitchen counter, and the orthodontist's estimate he'd folded into his glove box so he wouldn't have to look at it every night, and he'd grabbed his toolbox and gone. The showroom floor was all white marble and glass, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the street, a single car parked in the center under a spotlight like a piece of sculpture. Eli recognized the silhouette before he was even through the door. Low, wide, aggressive. A hypercar prototype that shouldn't have existed outside a research lab, let alone a public showroom. He recognized it because he'd helped build the powertrain that sat under that hood. Renata Cole stood beside it in a charcoal suit, a phone pressed to her ear, speaking in the clipped, efficient tone of someone conducting 3 conversations simultaneously. She was younger than the photos suggested, mid-40s, sharp-featured, the kind of composure that looked less like calm and more like a held breath. She ended her call the moment she saw Eli's van pull up outside, its faded paint and dented bumper visible even through tinted glass. "You're the mechanic," she said. Not quite a question. "Eli Navarro." He offered a hand. She looked at it, grease under the nails, a scar across one knuckle from a job gone wrong years ago, and didn't take it. "The dealership's contracted engineering team quit 40 minutes ago," she said instead. "Cited a fault they couldn't diagnose and, apparently, a liability concern about being associated with the outcome if it goes wrong publicly." Her jaw tightened. "I have investors arriving at 2 o'clock for a live demonstration that determines whether a $2 billion acquisition closes this quarter. This car needs to run before then." Behind her, 2 men in polo shirts with the dealership's logo watched from a distance, arms crossed, unmistakably amused. One of them muttered something to the other, and Eli caught the word "van guy," followed by a laugh neither of them bothered to hide. "That's her plan B?" The taller one said, just loud enough to carry. "Guy looks like he fixes lawnmowers." Renata didn't turn around, but something in her shoulders stiffened, like she'd heard it, and filed it away, without deciding yet whether to care. "Can you do this or not?" she asked Eli. "I'll need to look under the hood before I promise anything." "That's not the confidence I was hoping for. It's the honesty you should be hoping for," Eli said, and something in his tone made her actually look at him. Not the appraising glance she'd given his hands, but something closer to attention. "Fine," she said. "You have until 1:30. After that, I need to start thinking about what I tell the room." Eli popped the hood and felt the same jolt of recognition hit him twice as hard as the silhouette had. The engine bay was almost exactly as he remembered it from a decade ago, in a research facility outside Modena, when he'd been one of 4 engineers cleared to work on a joint hybrid hypercar propulsion program between two companies that no longer existed under those names. He remembered the late nights, the arguments over battery thermal management, and the fail-safe system he'd designed after a testing incident nearly cost someone their hand, a hidden calibration chip that would shut the whole system down safely rather than risk a catastrophic battery event. He remembered, too, exactly how that project had ended for him. A buyout, a restructuring, a new chief engineer named Grant Whitfield, who'd absorbed the entire propulsion team's work into a single patent filing under his own name, 3 months after quietly pushing out anyone who might contest it, including Eli, whose severance had come with an end so broad it made him nervous just thinking about it now, 10 years later, standing over the very engine he wasn't supposed to remember building. He didn't say any of that to Renata Cole. Not yet. He just got to work. The first half hour he ran the diagnostics any competent mechanic would run, checked the battery pack's primary output, the drive inverter, the basic circuits that 3 trained engineers had apparently already exhausted. Nothing. Exactly as he expected, because the fault wasn't in any single visible system. It was in the fail-safe logic itself, a deliberately obscure protection layer that would shut the whole propulsion system down the moment it detected an anomaly upstream. A system that, as far as Eli knew, only one other living person fully understood, and that person had spent a decade taking credit for designing it. Behind him, Renata paced the showroom floor, phone against her ear, voice low and controlled even as the tension in it grew sharper with each passing minute. Eli caught fragments, investors, timeline. The board isn't going to wait, Grant. Where are you? And understood, slowly, that the man whose name was stamped on the very system failing in front of him was somehow unreachable at the exact moment his creation needed him most. 40 minutes in, Eli found it. A corroded relay in the thermal management subsystem, tucked behind a panel that wasn't marked on any schematic outside the original design documents, because he'd built it that way himself. At the request of a security team paranoid about industrial espionage, he cleaned the connection, ran a bypass test, and felt the whole car hum faintly to life around him as auxiliary systems came back online. Renata appeared at his shoulder so quietly he hadn't heard her approach. "You found something." "I found the problem," Eli said. "Give me 20 more minutes and she'll run." 20 minutes. After 3 engineers with combined decades of experience found nothing in 4 hours. "Sometimes it's about knowing exactly where to look," Eli said, and something in the careful neutrality of his voice made her frown. The way you frown at a puzzle piece that fits a little too perfectly. "You've worked on systems like this before." "I've worked on a lot of engines." "Not like this one." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "This propulsion architecture isn't public. It's not published anywhere. 3 specialized engineers needed proprietary documentation just to attempt a diagnosis. And you found the fault in under an hour with a toolbox that looks like it's been dropped down a flight of stairs." Eli didn't answer right away. Somewhere behind them, the 2 dealership employees in polo shirts had stopped laughing and started watching more carefully, sensing the air in the room shift even if they didn't understand why. 20 minutes, Eli said instead. "Let me finish, and then we can talk about what I know." Renata studied him a moment longer, then nodded, slow and deliberate, and stepped back. 18 minutes later, the hypercar's engine turned over with a sound like controlled thunder, the showroom's glass windows rattling faintly with the force of it. The 2 mechanics in polo shirts stopped talking altogether. Somewhere near the entrance, a small crowd of early arriving investors had gathered, drawn by the noise, phones already lifting to capture the moment. Renata walked to the driver's side window as the engine settled into a smooth, powerful idle and looked at Eli with an expression that had shed every trace of the coldness from an hour ago. "You did it," she said. "Told you 20 minutes was enough. I owe you considerably more than $400 an hour for this." "We can talk about that," Eli said, But first there's something you should know, and I'd rather tell you now than let you find out from someone else at your investor meeting. Something flickered across Renata's face. Wariness. The particular alertness of someone who'd learned that easy solutions to expensive problems usually came with expensive strings attached. Go on. The fail-safe system that just failed, Eli said quietly. I designed it. 10 years ago, at a joint propulsion research facility outside Modena. I was on the 4-person engineering team that built the original architecture for this exact platform. Before your acquisition target restructured, and a man named Grant Whitfield took the entire team's work and filed it under his own name. Renata went very still. Grant Whitfield is the chief propulsion engineer on this acquisition. He's the reason my board believes this technology is defensible IP worth $2 billion. I know, Eli said. I've spent 10 years fixing radiators and transmissions at an independent shop 3 days a week because the severance and ENDA I signed made it functionally impossible to work anywhere in this industry again without risking a lawsuit I couldn't afford to fight. He held her gaze. I didn't come here today to tell you this. I came here to fix a car for grocery money and my son's orthodontist bill. But I'm not going to let you walk into a $2 billion acquisition believing a man stole this work without at least telling you the truth first. Renata was quiet for a long moment, the engine humming steady between them, investors beginning to filter through the showroom's glass doors in the background, unaware that the demonstration they'd come to witness had just become something else entirely. Prove it, she said finally, not unkindly, the flat, exacting tone of someone whose entire career had been built on not believing things until the evidence made belief unavoidable. I have the original design logbooks, Eli said. Dated, initialed, predating every patent filing Whitfield ever submitted on this architecture by at least 8 months. I kept them because some part of me always knew this day might come, even when I told myself it never would. Renata glanced toward the growing crowd of investors near the entrance, then back at Eli, something calculating and fast-moving behind her eyes. The demonstration starts in 11 minutes, she said. I need this car to run for my board. I also need to know exactly what I'm walking into before Grant Whitfield stands up in front of them and takes credit for a system that just failed and was fixed by someone he tried to erase. She extended her hand. Show me the logbooks tonight. Properly, with my legal team present. Eli shook her hand. Her grip was firm, exact. The handshake of someone already 3 moves ahead, recalculating an entire deal in real time. The investor demonstration went forward as scheduled, the hypercar gliding across the test track outside with the smooth, silent power of a system finally working exactly as it had been designed to a decade earlier. Grant Whitfield stood at the podium afterward, silver-templed and polished, accepting congratulations from board members who had no idea that the woman standing quietly at the back of the room now held a folder that would end his career within the week. 3 days later, in a conference room with none of the showroom's marble polish, Renata sat across from her board with Eli beside her, a stack of dated logbooks between them. Before we finalize the acquisition terms, she said, there's a matter of intellectual property provenance this board needs to understand. She nodded to Eli. 10 years ago, this man designed the fail-safe architecture that Grant Whitfield has represented as his own invention for the last decade. The same architecture that's the centerpiece of this acquisition's entire valuation. Whitfield's composure cracked exactly once, a flicker before he recovered it. I don't know what this individual is claiming, but I built that system personally. I have the original patent filings, filed 8 months after these logbooks were dated, Renata said, sliding the folder across the table. Filed 3 weeks after Mr. Navarro's severance agreement was signed. An agreement, I should note, drafted personally by you, with language broad enough to prevent him from ever speaking about his own work without risking a lawsuit he couldn't afford. The room went silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. One board member leaned forward, flipping through the logbook's pages slowly. expression shifting from skepticism to something colder. If this is verified, she said, the entire IP foundation of this acquisition is compromised. It's verified, Renata said. My legal team confirmed it this morning. Which means this board has a choice. Proceed with an acquisition built on stolen work and expose the company to enormous liability down the road, or correct the record now, properly, and negotiate fair terms with the man who actually built what we're buying. Whitfield's face had gone the color of old paper. Renata, 20 years of my career were apparently built on work that isn't yours, she said, and her voice had none of the coldness from the showroom floor, only a hard, exhausted clarity. You're suspended pending a full audit. Effective immediately. He left without another word, the door closing softly behind him in a way that felt, to Eli, like the quiet click of something enormous finally settling into place after 10 years of grinding tension. 6 weeks later, the sound of small engines filled a go-kart track on the edge of town, tires squealing against asphalt. Theo's laughter carrying over the noise as he came around the final turn 2 lengths ahead of his father. You're letting me win, Theo called back, grinning. I am absolutely not letting you win, Eli said, gunning his cart around the corner and closing half the gap before the finish line swallowed the distance. You're just better than me now. It happens. They pulled into the pits, Theo pulling off his helmet, hair sticking up in every direction, cheeks flushed with the particular joy of a kid who'd just beaten his dad fair and square for the first time in his life. Mrs. Alvarez's braces are done, right? Theo asked. The lady from the car company? She really paid for all of it? She really did, Eli said, thinking of the settlement papers now sitting in a drawer at home, proper patent credit, a decade of back royalties, and a consulting position with Renata's engineering division that Eli was still turning over slowly in his mind, unsure whether he belonged in boardrooms after so many years underneath cars instead of inside them. Was the mean lady still mean afterward? Theo asked, echoing a question Eli suspected every kid asked eventually, in one form or another, about the adults who'd wronged their parents. No, Eli said. She learned something about someone she trusted for a long time. It changed how she saw things. Theo nodded, satisfied by the simple justice of it, the way kids always were. That's good. People should get to learn stuff. Yeah, Eli said, watching the late afternoon sun catch the track's asphalt, feeling something in his chest finally uncoil after 10 years of carrying a truth nobody would let him tell. They should. He ruffled his son's hair, and for a long, quiet moment neither of them said anything else. Just the fading whine of go-kart engines cooling in the afternoon air, ordinary and unremarkable and entirely. Perfectly enough.